now the podcast starts.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the podcast on which we talk about horror. Sometimes we do talk about other things. Quite often, we swear. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by the brilliant film studies lecturer and all-round doctor of horror, Stella Gaynor. Hello, Stella.
Hey Dan, you alright?
I'm very well, thank you. And of course, I am Dan T.D. Velasquez. Today, we're going to be talking about a family who I am reliably informed by MC Hammer do what they want to do, say what they want to say, feel what they want to feel, and play how they want to play. This family is, of course, the Addams Family. Stella's just done a bit of clicking fingers on the camera. Specifically, we're talking about the 1993 movie Addams Family Values, because I'd never seen it before, so it's a missed classic for me. But it was Stella's suggestion.
Nurse, how close are the contractions?
Every 15 seconds, doctor.
Are you in unbearable pain? My darling, is it torture?
Oui.
Forceps!
Forceps.
Go ahead!
What news?
Father, what is it?
It's an Addams. He has my father's eyes.
Gomez, take those out of his mouth. He's an adorable little baby.
Fine. Rub it in.
Children, why do you hate the baby?
We don't hate him. We just want to play with him. Especially his head.
You'll meet someone very special. Someone who won't press charges.
Isn't he a lady killer?
Acquitted.
Women must follow you everywhere.
Store detectives.
And the stork flew down from heaven and turned into a baby. Our parents had sex.
Stella, why did you want to talk about Addams Family Values?
Oh God, many reasons. I think the biggest reason is I remember going to see it at the cinema. So it was 1993, so I would have been 12. I loved it in the cinema, and I got it on VHS for the next birthday or Christmas, so the next available gift-giving time when it was out on VHS. And I watched it so much that the tape snapped.
Right.
Just literally wore it out. And I think to this day, I can still quote most of it, if not all of it. And I think sometimes with comedies, particularly with comedies, they can age quite badly. And I did watch it again recently, really recently, which I think is why I ended up mentioning it to you that we should talk about it. I think it was just on the telly, and it's aged really well. Loads of the jokes still fall really well. It doesn't have, sometimes you watch a comedy 20 years later and you think, oh God, maybe that's aged badly. But with this film, I feel like it's really held up. It's got an incredible cast that we'll get onto in a little bit, I'm sure, and it still makes me absolutely belly laugh every time I watch it. Even though I know all the jokes, I know all the lines, it still makes me absolutely howl with laughter. It's just so good. It's really, really good. And if anybody's not seen it, like yourself, what are you doing? Go and watch it.
Let's point out straight away that both this movie and its 1991 progenitor are on Paramount Plus. So if you happen to be a member of that, you can watch it right away. And they're both beautiful looking movies and incredibly easy to enjoy. I think the first film does suffer a little bit from being dated, but I don't think the sequel does. And there's something about the world that they create, the actual world that the Addams family live in, is kind of so beautifully odd and disconnected to modern America, but also growing out of it. It's got that wonderful comic Southern Gothic thing.
Yeah.
It kind of is. It's kind of timeless, and indeed, we should fill in a little background for listeners who have not who are not familiar with these movies, by the way, it seems daft to say spoiler warnings on the discussion of a comedy, but I guess we are going to spoil everything.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the movie, do go and watch it. But if you want to just listen on, here comes the detail. So the Addams Family were a family of characters created by the American satirical cartoonist Charles Addams for a series of comics published in the New Yorker magazine or newspaper. I'm not actually sure.
Somewhere in the middle, I think. Yeah, so it's a magazine type situation, but it's got longer articles like we would consider a newspaper, like a broadsheet. Somewhere between a broadsheet and a magazine, I think.
Okay. So he drew kind of one page or one panel little kind of cartoon strips, which continued for many years. So they started in 1938. He also drew them in other publications, I think, in other places. They weren't all in the New Yorker. In 1964, there was a TV series made of them, which is weird to think of. That TV series was made when those characters were already nearly 30 years old,
Yeah.
So they'd already permeated the culture, but the TV show kind of really successfully incarnated them, kind of ingrained them into the psyche of, I guess, not just America, but everywhere. I mean, I grew up with that series, and I remember seeing the original 1991 Addams Family adaptation. I watched that on TV it would probably have been about 93, 94.
Yeah, by the time it got round to telly, yeah.
And even then, as a 12, 13-year-old, I was aware of the the original TV series and how perfectly the movie seemed to adapt it.
Yeah.
Everything about it kind of felt right. And subsequently, it's been turned into multiple cartoon series. It's now a cartoon animated movie franchise. The Netflix has the series Wednesday, starring the wonderful Jenna Ortega, who we were talking about on the Scream episode, and it kind of goes on and on. And I think this movie franchise in the 90s, which happened, the first film was made in 1990, just a couple of years after Charles Addams' death, and it was originally, the director originally sought for it was Tim Burton, but he was too busy. So Barry Sonnenfeld, who'd never directed a movie before, but had been a very successful cinematographer shooting a lot of the Coen brothers movies, for instance, was eventually brought on board after Terry Gilliam had also turned it down. And apparently it was an incredibly stressful experience for him as his first movie. But it made a lot of money. It went down well. Like I say, although I think it's dated in some aspects, it's kind of perfectly pitched as an adaptation of those characters. It just feels really right. And in fact, I'll mention this now because it's not to do with the film we're actually discussing, but the very opening of the first Addams Family movie, when I rewatched it last week, I'd completely forgotten what the opening was, and it made me laugh my head off. It's Christmas carolers singing Happy Christmas songs, and then the camera kind of slowly pans up, and above them on the roof of the Addams Family house, the family are all stood there and they pour a cauldron of boiling oil down onto the carolers, and the camera just tracks into the cauldron, and that's where the credits come up inside the kind of steaming cauldron. I thought that was kind of an amazing opening. And it did make me laugh a lot, that movie. But then, of course, because of the success of that, 2 years later, we got another movie which reunited many of the same team. Not quite everybody, but it's directed once again by Sonnenfeld, has most of the same cast returning, plus a really wonderful new supporting cast. And I think the movie was a hit as well. It was a critical success, and I think they would have made more had Raul Julia, who plays Gomez Addams, the father of the family, sadly passed away
He
in
did.
1994 from a stroke following complications from stomach cancer, I think. So he died at the age of, I think, 54.
Wow.
And later on they tried to revive the series with a TV movie sort of sequel, which starred Tim Curry as Gomez and Daryl Hannah as his wife Morticia. But that didn't go anywhere, and I think the franchise kind of lay fallow then for a while. But obviously it's revived now in a different form. So this is in a way a perfect little pair of movies that feels like it could have led on to many more movies, and in a different universe probably would have done. But they're still wonderful kind of as they are, and especially the second one, which we'll go on to discuss now. It's kind of hard to know where to start. Shall we start with the cast?
Yeah, let's start with the cast. So I just can't help but laughing because in my head I'm just running through all the various jokes that happen throughout the film.
By the way, the movie's written by Paul Rudnick, who didn't write the original Addams Family adaptation, but he did write other 90s comedies like In and Out with Kevin Kline, which is one I remember quite fondly.
Yeah.
And it's the tone of Addams Family Values. It's kind of perfectly in keeping with the tone that was set up in the previous film, but it's kind of even cheekier and in some ways darker as well. There's a kind of lovely ghoulish humour to it, which is perfect for the characters in the world. So
yeah. I mean, I said before that I watched it literally till the tape died when I was a kid, and it's only watching it 10, 20 years later that there's obviously lots of, it's full of jokes, it's family friendly to a point, but there's loads of lines in it that I didn't get until I was older. But they were talking about something else. They were quite strong innuendos, but an enjoyable film even as a grown-up. So on that, I would like to start, if we're talking about the cast, with Joan Cusack I think the best role of her career.
Yeah, well,
the best thing she's ever done.
Probably the biggest role. She's essentially the film's kind of special guest villain.
Yeah.
And
the Black Widow.
Whereas I'm kind of used to her. Yeah, a wonderful character. I'm kind of used to her turning up as like a supporting kind of bonus, usually in films starring her brother John Cusack.
Yeah.
But she's essentially, apart from the actual Addams family themselves, she's the main leading character in this movie, and she's just fantastic. And I was delighted to see her, and she plays a great kind of duplicitous villain who just has so many sides. So, she plays a character who basically comes to the Addams family as a nanny in a kind of glorious inversion of what we saw in The Omen recently. Where the family are desperately looking for a nanny who can deal with their bizarre children, and then this nanny turns up, but instead of in The Omen where they're an ostensibly normal family and this spooky nanny who has kind of a sinister aura about her, kind of arrives to quote unquote save them when they couldn't find any other suitable nannies. This time, this nanny who arrives seems to be like the most normal and upbeat and nice nanny who can somehow, for reasons which aren't immediately apparent, she can just take all the oddness of the Addams family in her stride, and she
doesn't care.
She doesn't care, and it's kind of wonderful. She just likes everything, and she's so bubbly. But then we gradually realise the reason that she's like that is it's all a front. She's researched the Addams family. She is a Black Widow style murderer whose modus operandi is to marry rich men and kill them for their money. I think we can all respect that. And she's basically researched the Addams family, knows that Uncle Fester, played by Christopher Lloyd, is single and the family is loaded, and therefore she wants to marry him and get his share of the fortune.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful bit where you find this out. You find out her background in that she's watching a TV crime special presented by Peter Graves, which is all about her. And, she's deliberately chosen to watch the kind of American Most Wanted kind of thing. I think she's eating chocolates while watching
she's
it.
lying in bed. And doesn't she turns up again it's when the kids are at summer camp, when Wednesday and Pugsley are at summer camp, and they're exchanging they're like top trump cards, aren't they? Like top trumps of serial killers.
Oh yes, that's
and
right.
One of them is her. It's like Black Widow. She's killed three. She already killed 3 husbands or something. So she's got five knives out of 5 on the little trump card. When the kids are like, oh, it's Debbie.
No, she's brilliant, and I love the shot where you see her pile of research that she's done on the Addams Family, and one piece that she's collected is an issue of a magazine called Lifestyles of the Rich and Freakish, and it's got a picture of Fester on the front cover. That's fantastic. She's
she just every scene that she's in, she just absolutely steals the scene, like her. And also, I do keep meaning to dress up as her for Halloween once. I think it would be fantastic. I need to get the blonde wig and some terrible coral coloured off the shoulder dress.
Right.
Totter about in high heels, in pastel colours. But I just all the bits that make me belly laugh, it's usually her. So when she's finally married Fester, and she's tried to kill him by chucking a radio in the bath.
Right, yes.
That doesn't work. She then tries to blow up the mansion, and she's just sat outside waiting for it to blow up, just looking at her watch, and she's practicing crying for the police. She's sat in the car, so she's sat there like, oh, officer, my husband was in there, and she practices crying, and it just blends into this sort of maniacal laughter as she's waiting for it to blow up. And as it does blow up, this huge explosion behind her, and she just barely flinches. She just sits there and touches her eyelashes and then drives off. And then we get the final scene where she's got them all in the electric chairs, and she's basically does a PowerPoint presentation of why she ends up like she is. And she's like, I didn't want Malibu Barbie, I wanted ballerina Barbie, graceful, delicate. Well, she's standing there really manic and going for all these slides of all these husbands. Like, he just had to go, and the house is on fire on this slide. And she's every single scene, she just absolutely steals it. I love her so much.
It's amazing. And the bit where she talks about I didn't want Malibu Barbie, and Gomez and Morticia's reaction is perfect.
Malibu Barbie.
The nightmare.
The nerve.
And also, ultimate spoilers, because that scene's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I was just so amazed and impressed that she is literally totally destroyed. She's basically disintegrated.
Yes,
when the
pile
baby
of dust.
Yes, when the baby electrocutes her. Wow. And because the whole plot mechanism of the sequel is that it starts that Morticia is pregnant, which is revealed in that amazing kind of pre-credit scene where Morticia just says, I'm having a baby right now. And then he just cuts to the hospital. And a cameo appearance there by David Hyde Pierce as the doctor. And therefore...
What do they call the baby?
Oh,
Pubert.
Yes. Yes. Something charming.
And doesn't he have a little mustache?
He's got a little pencil mustache. I feel like Pubert's played by 2 female babies, according to the end credits, so I can't remember their names. But I believe that they deserve special credit in our discussion, because Pubert is a fantastic little character, and with Gomez's pencil mustache as well. And also the scene where they are horrified because he's got very sick and he's become a very wholesome-looking baby with blonde hair and no pencil moustache.
Blonde curls. It's because Gomez, because Fester's gone and married Debbie, and Debbie's cut Fester off from the family. So Gomez is like in this almost like catatonic state, isn't he? Well, he misses his brother, and that means that all is not well in the house. So baby Pubert looks like a little angel. And is it Gomez's mother or Morticia's mother? It's one of them, and she's there, and she's like, if we don't sort this out soon, it's going to get worse. We're talking dimples.
Yes. So let's continue through the cast then. I feel like we've got to mention, even though she's not unique to this film, she's obviously in Addams Family one as well, but Angelica Houston, who is top billed, plays Morticia Addams, and is just stunning. Just absolutely perfect as this character, and is really aided in this movie by the cinematographer Don Peterman, who just lights her eyes perfectly. She always has that window of light on her eyes wherever she stands, and it kind of moves with her, and that's brilliant. But every line she says is basically a great joke, because everything the Addams is like and admire and profess is kind of the opposite of the American convention. And there's it's a recurring gag which is maybe a bit easy in a way, but somebody will say something horrible, and they will kind of react in the opposite way. Like the example that comes to mind is when they tried to console their older children, Wednesday and Pugsley, who are unhappy that they have a baby in their house and keep trying to kill him. And Morticia says, "It's not true, children, that whenever you have a new baby, you have to kill one of the other children." And Grandmama Addams goes, "Not anymore." She's like wistful.
I was just thinking, with the light on her face, and she looks stunning all the way through it, but those dresses that they must have just sewn her into, those tight black dresses, she looks fantastic throughout the film, and she's always just got a little eyebrow raised, hasn't she, in response to what people are saying.
I mean, it's kind of, the movie is the perfect approach, and maybe it takes this from the 60s TV series, which I haven't seen recently enough, but it kind of looks exactly like a comic or an illustration, without going so far that it feels like an unreal world. The actors are made up and costumed just kind of perfectly and just larger than life enough to really have the impact. But so the scenes where the Addamses interact with kind of more quote unquote normal real world
with the real world,
like is it in this film or the first one where they go to a police station?
It's in this one. It's in this one because Gomez wants them to go, because he's saying that my brother is being held as a sexual slave or something like that, and the detective's just like, you don't say.
Basically
doesn't give a shit.
My brother's been married. He's got married to this woman. You've got to do something about it. Yeah. So
all they do is have sex, and he's the detective's like, "You're kidding?" And Gomez is like, "Has the world gone mad?"
The detective in that scene, who's played by Nathan Lane in a cameo, who later played Gomez in the Broadway musical version with Bibby Newirth as Morticia, which I think is wonderful casting. I'd have loved to have seen that. But so they can do things like go into kind of real world, ordinary world situations like a police station or a maternity room and not look totally out of place. But at the same time, they are perfectly those characters, and they're instantly recognisable as those characters. And the maternity room has another bit that's that's kind of emblematic of that thing I say where they always react with delight to like really dark things, where they're wheeling Morticia in there and she's in labour, and Gomez is saying, is it agony, dear? and she just sort of smiles slightly and goes,
Oui.
So there's a later scene that's kind of along those lines. Morticia's in bed and Gomez is pacing around, and I can't really remember what they're talking about. And they're talking about something about a ball and chain. He's like, remember that from our honeymoon?
yes.
But on the subject of those two, you know, Gomez gives Fester the advice, you know, how to woo the lady, because Fester's falling rapidly in love with Debbie, and so Gomez is trying to give him all of his, like, you know, top tips, and is that you got to treat her like she's the most exquisite and beautiful creature that you've ever seen, and Gomez treats Morticia like that. Like their relationship is incredible. They love each other so much, and Christ knows what they get up to behind closed doors, all kinds of things. But it's, despite all of the silliness and all of the gothiciness, and there's a lot of silliness, they're a loving, loyal family.
Yes.
Throughout, and you know, you mess with one Addams and the whole clan will come down on top of you, and I think that's a really lovely thread that runs through it all. You know, Wednesday and Pugsley, brother and sister, or Wednesday and their Pugsley and, you know, little Hubert, but they'd have no one else harm them at all.
And that is a really lovely sidebar to that thread, is the whole summer camp thing, where Debbie arranges for Wednesday and Pugsley to be sent away to summer camp because she basically knows that they're onto them. Yeah. And basically at summer camp everybody hates Wednesday and Pugsley apart from the young character played by David Krumholtz, whose name I can't remember. Oh, he's called Joel, I think.
Joe, he's the little nerd, isn't he? Little geeky boy. He doesn't want to be outside. He's got asthma. He's allergic to everything. His mum and dad are making him go there to make some friends, and he just doesn't want to be there.
And there's a very sweet sort of almost romance between him and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. But apart from him, everybody at summer camp is like the antithesis of them. But it's really great how they stick together and remain themselves.
When the camp counsellors, whenever they say or announce anything, and they jump up and down clapping whenever they announce anything. God.
We should mention, we're talking about the cast as well. The camp counsellors are played by Peter MacNicol and Christine Baranski, who's the Broadway legend Christine Baranski. Yeah. And it was just amazing to see them again.
They play it so, like, gung-ho. They're completely believable, even though they're absolutely absurd characters. And they make Wednesday and Pugsley and Joel, isn't it? They make them go and sit in. Do they call it the Happy Hut?
The Harmony Hut.
Harmony Hut, and it's shed. And on the walls there's like pictures of, I don't know, fluffy animals on the wall, and then the worst picture that it zooms in on as they're cowering against the wall is a picture of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Saying heal the world.
Heal the world, yeah, and that horrible poster with the kind of sticking plaster on the earth. Kind of thing.
A band-aid on the earth. And they have to watch loads of Disney movies.
Yeah, there's a wonderful montage where you hear songs from Annie and various Disney movies and various chirpy, happy clips as the sun goes down, and that they're obviously in there for 24 hours being forced to watch all these things, and when they come out of the shed they've basically been brainwashed. But somebody at the studios of those various movies must have had a sense of humour, because they've allowed them to use all those clips. It is, you know, it's totally authentic, all the bits that you hear. And then when Wednesday comes out, there's that wonderful scene where they all seem to have been kind of brainwashed. They have this kind of 1,000-yard stare, and Wednesday sort of says, I'm happy now, I want to be part of your musical theatre, and she does a smile.
She tries to smile.
Wednesday's big version of a happy smile, and the main kind of principal girl from the conventional side of all the kids in the camp goes, "Stop it, she's scaring me." And we should mention as well that girl is played by Mercedes McNabb, who went on to ironically play a character called Harmony in Buffy, who is one of Cordelia's circle of friends.
Right.
Who kind of, I think, buzzes around for the first 3 series and is then maybe killed at the end of the 3rd series by the mayor, and is kind of memorably turned into a vampire in I think the alternative world episode, where everything's changed.
Yeah.
She's awesome, and she's also in Addams Family 1. She has a really nice little cameo as a Girl Scout selling cookies. Do you remember that scene? That's where I think Wednesday and Pugsley are trying to make some money for the family by selling lemonade, and the Girl Scout comes along and says, I'm sorry, I can't buy you lemonade. I only drink lemonade made from real lemons, but I could sell you some of my Girl Scout cookies. And Wednesday goes, are they made from real Girl Scouts? And the Girl Scout just kind of walks away in disgust. But I'd like to think that's the same character as we see here. She gets a lot more to do in Addams Family Values. And I have to say, she, as a precocious child performer, she's either genuinely awful or really, really wonderfully good, because it's a perfect performance of an annoying child actor. Because the character is actually an actor. She's given the star role in Peter McNichol's kind of Thanksgiving musical play. Which is a highlight of the movie when they finally...
Absolute highlight of the movie. Because, Wednesday... How does she go about it now? So the play's going well. Wednesday's playing Pocahontas, isn't she?
Yes.
And the play's going well, and Wednesday's... Pocahontas' character is supposed to come on stage, and, she's thanking whatever the blonde girl's called, saying, you got your hairs like the sun and all that kind of thing. And then she just goes completely off script.
Welcome to our table, our new primitive friends. Thank you, Sarah Miller. You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen. Your hair is the color of the sun. Your skin is like fresh milk. And everyone loves you. Stop! Sit! Wait. What? We cannot break bread with you. Wednesday! You have taken the land which is rightfully ours. Years from now, my people will be forced to live in mobile homes, on reservations. Your people will wear cardigans and drink highballs. We will sell our bracelets by the roadsides. You will play golf and enjoy hot hors d'oeuvres. My people will have pain and degradation. Your people will have stick shifts. The gods of my tribe have spoken. They have said, do not trust the pilgrims. Especially Sarah Miller. Gary, she's changing the words. And for all these reasons, I've decided to scalp you and burn your village to the ground.
And then they just kind of destroy... she obviously has enlisted the support of many of the kind of the marginalised kids. There's a wonderful scene where it pans across the faces of all the kids who've not been cast in the main parts in the play, and it's all the ones who are from ethnic minorities, or they're a bit pale or dumpy, or their face doesn't fit, and they've all kind of been left out. And they're all playing the Indians, and they just basically storm the stage and destroy the set.
Destroy the set. And then there's that lovely scene, just that moment at the end where Wednesday, as Pocahontas, is sat in the canoe and she's just being rowed across the lake by Joel as like the set burns behind her. It's really good. It's really good. That's a highlight of the movie. Absolutely.
It is. Oh, I remember thinking when Wednesday was kind of acting brainwashed, and she was playing Pocahontas, and kind of thinking, where is this going to go? How is she going to turn the tables? And it's completely satisfying, because it is based in a genuinely awful, kind of a piece of American history. And that anger is real. And I think that any audience member with a connection or an understanding of the situation of what happened to the Native American peoples have been betrayed in all sorts of ways and continue to be so.
It's not stopped.
No, I mean the U.S. government, U.S. Supreme Court has just barred the Navajo people from claiming the water in, I think, Nevada, because the water in that region is running out. It's basically a desert, and the Navajo people have said, "Can we have rights to the water, please? We kind of need it to survive." But the U.S. Supreme Court have gone, "No, we don't think you have the right to the water. And anyway, we'd rather Las Vegas have it because that makes money."
That's where the money is.
So once again, it just keeps going on, and it's absolutely awful. And it's, in a way, it's a shame that not only a white character, but a character as noticeably white as Wednesday Addams is the one to kind of vocalise this point. But it's a point that's kind of joyous to hear. And it's very funny as well. It doesn't stop the movie in any kind of polemic, but it just adds extra justification to her revenge, which is just delicious to see.
Very good. But with the enormity of that, and it is a significant part of the film, I think the film does a very good job of running those two narratives together. So you've got two parallel stories going on. You've got the kids who've been sent away to camp and having to deal with that, and then you've got Uncle Fester and Debbie, and that sort of family drama. And I think the film does a really excellent job of jumping between the two and giving each of those storylines that do come back together at the end, but it gives them both enough space for it to feel like, because I think it could have felt like the kids at summer camp was just like an add-on, but it's not. I feel like that part of the film is as important of the story as all the stuff with Debbie and trying to kill Fester for the insurance and all that kind of thing, and it's as strong as the rest of the film, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's integral, isn't it? And both kind of plots of the movie build at the same time. And contribute to each other until you've got the point whereby the two plots come together when Pugsley and Wednesday escape from summer camp. And then rejoin the family and everything comes together. It's kind of beautifully done, actually. So who else shall we mention? I'm going to
Christopher Lloyd, I reckon.
Yeah, we've not talked about Christopher Lloyd,
Christopher Lloyd.
As Uncle Fester. He's obviously in the previous movie as well, and the previous movie is all about Fester kind of coming back to the family, so it also explores that theme of the unity of the family kind of wonderfully. Christopher Lloyd's an interesting actor. He's one of my favourites.
Yes. Same.
I've read about him and studied him over the years. He's a Meisner trained actor, which I've done.
What does that mean?
That's a technique which kind of teaches you to be really in the moment. One of the exercises which we did, I think I've only been to like 2 Meisner lessons in my life, so I'm not an expert, but they do things like where you basically you're in a team with one other person, and the other person will say a word to you, and you've got to say the same word back to them in exactly the same kind of intonation that they do, not like doing an impression of them, but it's the exercise is basically about listening to the other person and also listening to your own voice. And Christopher Lloyd talked about how until he was trained in Meisner, because he started off acting before he'd learned that, he thought that he didn't really have technique, he just did his best every night, and he couldn't really control whether he would be good or bad on a particular night if he was doing a piece of theatre. But with Meisner he kind of learned to regulate himself. All of that is kind of quite a fluffy way of talking about him in this movie, because he's so over the top, and I think that
just the way he moves.
Yes,
it's just
well,
hilarious.
I was recently listening to a discussion of another film that he's in, and somebody said he's always miscast, and I don't think that's true, but he definitely has a uniqueness to him that I think is amazing. I mean, like in he's obviously, I think he's his most famous role is probably when he plays Doc Brown in the Back
to the Future.
And there's a bit in the middle of Back to the Future 2 where the plot of that movie is so complicated that Christopher Lloyd basically has to draw a diagram on a chalkboard and explain everything. And Michael J. Fox goes, well, why don't we just go back in time and stop this all happening? And Christopher Lloyd goes, we can't, because, and kind of runs around the room. And the way he just, he just basically puts pace into every word of this exposition to make it really effective. Is incredible, and with Fester, he's kind of like that. He makes everything sort of huge, and I can sort of see how an audience member could find that annoying or over the top. But Fester is not in any way a subtle character. He's kind of meant to be in this family. In this family, he's meant to be the odd one.
He's the outcast. Yeah, in this family.
So,
he's the one he's a bit weird, that guy.
And I think Lloyd is probably far older than the character's meant to be, or maybe that's part of the oddness of it. Like in the first film, when he's got amnesia and he thinks he belongs to a different family, and he looks older than the actress who plays his supposed mother in that, and they just kind of roll with it. And the weirdness of him going, yes, mother, I love you, and all this stuff. And then in this movie, like every moment is a huge grimace or a shout, or sometimes he kind of growls a line. And obviously, he's running around after Joan Cusack, kind of on his knees, going, Debbie, I love you. And then when she decides. With remarkable kind of calculation, but maybe it's a little bit slow on the uptake, that she realises the way to control this man is to use my sexuality. Yeah. She introduces him to sex, and then he has kind of this massive expression of lustfulness on his face, kind of throughout the rest of the movie, like, you've changed my life.
When she's going to blow up the house and she leaves, and they're having their like 3-week wedding anniversary or something ridiculous, and he's running around in a heart-shaped pinny cooking, and then she leaves a present on the table and he shakes it, and it clearly sounds like metallic stuff in there, and he just looks at her like, is it a bomb?
Yes.
And she's like, what?
Yeah, but he thinks that's delightful. Again, with just, kind of.
But when they're both being that outrageous, like post wedding.
Yeah.
And Fester's fully in love, and Debbie's just getting really exasperated with him, and he just doesn't see that she's like, you're an idiot. Why won't you die? Get away from me. And he's like, give me a kiss. Give me a 20.
Yeah, one of the things that's wonderful about Debbie that I wanted to say before was that once the film reveals that she's actually, a murdering, duplicitous criminal, it's like the character knows that the audience knows, so she doesn't bother to hide it anymore. She's like ridiculously crap at pretending to not be a scheming murderer. Yeah. So she just is really blatant in the way she does everything. And with Fester, because once she realises she can't kill him, she decides, well, I've got to make him somehow respectable if he's going to be around my house. So she dresses him up.
Toupee.
She toupees him up and gives him this kind of 1970s look, which made me think a bit of like Benny Bjorn from ABBA. I wasn't sure if it was like a direct reference to them, but it felt very familiar, and he just looks amazing with this kind of big cream coloured polo neck jumper on and this massive toupee.
This blonde toupee. Like a strawberry blonde toupee that he keeps like, it's itching him, isn't it? He doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I just can't think of a bad moment of the film at all. Everything I've got written down here is just all of the things that make that make me laugh. I wanted to mention another excellent line from Wednesday Addams when they first arrive at camp and they're first starting to meet some of the families, and they meet, I can't remember who, I think it's the family of the blonde girl, and Morticia says something, or she's at that age when girls have only got one thing on their mind, and the other mother says boys, and Wednesday says homicide. And they're like, okay, and they move on to go talk to another family.
That's
it's just every line, every scene, every sequence just makes me laugh.
Just brilliant.
So much.
And we've got to mention Christina Ricci as well, plays Wednesday.
Yeah.
She's just incredible in both of these movies. Stayed looking childlike for a really long time, to the extent that when she turns up in Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, where she's the romantic lead with Johnny Depp, it's a bit creepy because she still looks kind of 12.
Yeah,
I remember thinking that at the time.
You still look 14. Yeah.
But she's awesome in this character, and obviously
it was great to see her turn up in the Wednesday Netflix series as well, wasn't it?
Oh, is she in that? I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, she's in it, and it was. So obviously she's not going to play Wednesday because this is about teenage Wednesday going to high school. But yeah, she's in that. I can't remember who she plays. I think she's a tutor at the school.
Right. Okay.
I think. And she's wearing like these big glasses. And I think she's got a wig on. I don't think that's her hair. So you could miss her for a few scenes, and eventually be like, oh, there she is. There's Christina Ricci, and yeah. So it was nice to have her in it. I think it would have felt off if she wasn't in it, at least for a little bit. But her character actually ends up being quite significant. But
okay,
yeah, it's great to see her back in the Addamses in one way or another. And just while we're talking about Wednesday, I would like to say that Catherine Zeta-Jones as Morticia is she does such a good job. I mean, Catherine Zeta-Jones, she's an absolute beauty. Anyway, but and then to dress her up as a goth, it was like, whoa.
Right. Okay.
Oh, hello. But
wow.
yeah, she's fantastic in it. So yeah, again, if anyone's not seen Wednesday, then do go and have a look.
Big recommendation for Wednesday. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it. I really would. Because I just want to see more of these characters in this world, because just dipping into these two movies has been so joyful. And I just want to spend more time with them, and it is so sad to watch this movie knowing that obviously Raul Julia was not long for this world. He's so perfect as Gomez, and I guess we should just talk about him for a minute, because it's such an energetic performance in both
his
of
intensity.
these movies.
I mean, he's a man that's just filled with love, isn't he?
Yes.
He loves his wife, he loves his brother, he loves his kids, and all of the intensity in his performance is all about how much he loves these people. That's
really well put, that, actually. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought to put it like that, but he is, despite the kind of the gothic moodiness of the characters, he is an incredibly positive, entirely engaging kind of paragon of virtue, really. And in both movies, the kind of sequence, both movies have a period towards the end, I think both caused by the absence of Fester, where Gomez becomes depressed. There's a wonderful bit in the first movie when they've been kind of turfed out of their family plot, and they're living in, I think, a motel, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's a line about the rent is paid till the end of the week. And when Morticia says, should we go out and do something, he goes, what? And Miss Gilligan? He's just kind of become this kind of tragic figure sinking into his sofa watching TV.
Couch potato, isn't he?
Yeah. But he's so dynamic and so wonderful when he's on full power. And he's just a brilliant character. I think Julia leaves a huge kind of shadow on that role. I mean, they all do, because they're all kind of perfectly cast. But I think any actor who plays Gomez, it's going to be very hard to not think, is this person as good as Raul Julia? Because and that's partly because obviously Julia's not around. I mean, I don't think, even though he was great as well, that the actor who played him in the 60s series, who was John Astin, who was wonderful, and I think he's still alive. You know, I don't think anyone's going, John, you know, this person doesn't measure up to John Astin. Julia is kind of the standard, and it's just
that's our Gomez, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and we've talked about, or we've mentioned this with other films or TV series that we've talked about, the things, the films, the texts that you go back to for a bit of comfort, or, you know, we've definitely used the phrase comfort horror before, and you know, the film has lots of horror aesthetics to it. It is a gothic story, but I would also put it in my box of things I watch when I want to feel comforted or happy, or you know, if I'm having a miserable afternoon, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to stick on. So it's, you know, it's something that I've gone back to for years and years and years, as now I can watch it on a digital copy rather than my broken old VHS cassette. But yeah, it's a wonderful film, and it makes me very, very happy.
I don't blame you, Solly. It has a real warmth to it, and that's the remarkable quality. So, you know, I would recommend it hugely to anyone, and I look forward to going back to both of these movies. Before we kind of wind up, I'm sure we both have a few more kind of quick points we'd like to mention, and I feel like I should clarify the comment that I made earlier, whereby I said that the 1991 Addams Family is a bit dated, but Values isn't, and I think it's mainly because in the 1991 film there is a very slight streak of ableism running through some of the jokes and more minor characters, and this dates the film because obviously it wouldn't be done the same way now. It's distasteful and insensitive and offensive, really, but also even in the context of the less politically sensitive attitudes of the time, it kind of mars the film because it's out of step with the world that has been created by the movie. The characters in the Addams Family are freakish, to use a word from Addams Family Values, and their freakishness, quote unquote, is due either to their own choices, in terms of their non-conformist attitudes, the way they dress, the things they are enthusiastic about, or perhaps they are kind of absurd in being, such as such a thing which is the unexplained crawling hand, or Cousin It, you know, something like that. Whereas in the 1991 Addams Family, there are a couple of Addams cousins who basically have normal, real-world ailments, which are displayed as, which are played as freakish and played for laughs. So there are a couple of conjoined twins, around whom are generated a few crass jokes, and that doesn't play today, and it's a shame. Whereas in Addams Family Values, although those characters do appear, they're very much played down, they're in the background, and maybe this is because the producers were becoming sensitive to some of these issues. Who knows? But it is a notable difference between the films, and I think that, you know, the presence of that kind of ableism is a definite flaw in the original movie. But apart from that, the first film is very good, but the sequel tops it. And I think the other thing that kind of dates the first one a bit is maybe the budget ran out, because towards the end of the movie there are some very kind of shonky special effects sequences when people are kind of flying through the air and landing in graves and things, and it all looks a bit dodgy. but the second movie has none of that either.
No.
And I guess the first movie was made by a studio that was falling apart, and they didn't expect it to make money, but then it did. So I guess some of that box office revenue probably went into the sequel then. And I mean, the sequel has, apart from Don Peterman, who is a different cinematographer than did the original, and he went on to work with Barry Sonnenfeld again on Men in Black, and he'd shot Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, and he's a really good. Actually, thinking of those three movies, he's got a pretty unique kind of selling point, which is that he shoots kind of comedy special effects movies. You know that, and all those movies are kind of beautiful to look at and kind of really work and have a really nice tone as well. So I think it contributes to that. But also this movie has sets by Ken Adam, the James Bond designer from all the classic kind of Oscar-winning early Bond films, and he also designed the sets for Stanley Kubrick, Doctor Strangelove, and things like that. And to be honest, I didn't notice because it just looks like the same world as Addams Family 1, which was a different designer, but still, it's the fact that I didn't notice the sets is probably a good thing. You know, it just kind of feels part of the world.
More immersive, yeah. Well, the last thing I'd say, and no pun intended, given we've just talked about effects, is Thing.
Oh yes.
The lovely little thing, and it's done beautifully in Addams Family Values, and I think even now, 23 years later, 33 years later, 23 years later, I don't know. It's 33 years later.
Well, it's 30 years later.
30 years later, which is very
the original.
Which is very upsetting. But even now, the effect of Thing still looks fantastic.
Absolutely brilliant. And actually, yes, and that's a really good point. Even in the first film, that they are brilliant. And when I say that the effects in that movie go bad towards the end, I'm not talking about things like Thing. It's brilliantly done. The kind of the classic horror movie crawling hand.
Yeah.
But they do it so perfectly that Thing becomes a character.
Yeah.
And in
it's
the
got
sequel,
a little personality and everything. It's great.
Yeah. And in the sequel, he's kind of running around in little vehicles, whether it be like on a roller skate,
a little skateboard,
and gets to drive a car at one point.
Yeah, he does.
And I did think,
she, don't know.
How do you do that without being able to press the accelerator or the brake? But whatever.
Doesn't matter. It's the least of our worries, I think, given there's a disembodied hand running around the place.
Very cool. Yeah, that's true. And you get, not only in this movie, we just need to mention the other members of the family. So you get a bit more of Cousin It, who was in the first film briefly, and is now married and has a little baby Cousin It.
Which it's got a dummy in its
Yes. And Cousin It, for any listeners who are struggling to remember, is basically a small fur ball who speaks in an incomprehensible squeak, and nobody quite knows what it is. But what a lovable character! And now there's a little Cousin It as well, and also Grandmama, who in the first movie was played by an actress called Judith Malina, who's kind of at the time was kind of a renowned theatre practitioner. And in the second film, I didn't notice at first. It took me like halfway through the film, but it's not the same actor. I don't know why Judith Malina didn't come back. She was still alive.
Right. She might have just had another project, I suppose.
Yeah.
Happens, doesn't it?
But basically, I found myself just looking at Grandmama, and she's obviously an actor in heavy kind of old age makeup.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, is that Carol Kane? Could that be Carol Kane, who we previously talked about on this podcast when we discussed the 1979 movie When a Stranger Calls, which she's amazing in, but obviously she's a stunning comedy character actress in movies such as the one that she's probably most famous for a great cameo in is The Princess Bride, but also she's in Scrooged. I found out since we talked about When a Stranger Calls, she actually won an Oscar in one of her earliest movie roles, which was a 1975 movie almost entirely made in Yiddish about Jewish immigrants to New York. It's called Hester Street, and it's a wonderful movie by a kind of unjustly forgotten director called Joan McLean Silver, and she's brilliant in it. And I think and there's no film in which Carol Kane is not brilliant, but there's something about Grandmama where I kind of had in the back of my head, that character should really be played by Carol Kane. If there's anyone who's great at playing kind of old crones in heavy makeup, it's Carol Kane. And then I actually realised it is Carol Kane. My God, she's fantastic, and she has some great jokes in this movie, like the wonderful scene where they find that baby Pubert has become quote unquote ill and has developed blonde curly hair and that, and Grandmama is trying to reverse it using a series of spells and things. She's fantastic.
Does she puts a curse on Debbie, doesn't she, when they go and visit them at Debbie and Fester's mansion? She's got a skull.
Oh yes.
She sort of points the skull and she says something, and she points the skull in the shape of a cross. And Debbie it's like, what was that? And she's like, just a curse.
She's fantastic.
Right, I'm going to go and watch it again. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, I feel the same myself, and I think, there's so much in it. I'm just looking through my notes. I'm going to very quickly mention the last few things, because they are just mentions, really. So when they go to the police station, it is actually the 13th precinct. You see that on the sign, which I think is a lovely reference to John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13.
Which is a great film.
It is such a great film. The character of Joel, played by David Krumholtz, is kind of the stereotypical kind of Jewish geek in big glasses. But I thought, is he meant to be young Steven Spielberg or even young J.J. Abrams?
Maybe,
He was not quite this young at the time. And actually, I think that might have been part of the intention, or at least maybe not those specific guys, but kind of to reflect the geeky childhood of Jewish kids who grew up to be filmmakers, because Joel's dad, who turns up, is actually played by Barry Sonnenfeld. So I feel like there's something a bit autobiographical going on there. Just for you, Stella, I noted this down. I think it's when they're going through the deck of cards, which the Black Widow is listed in. I think they've also got the Zodiac Killer in there.
There's got Zodiac in there, yeah.
And I thought Stella would be correcting them and saying killers.
It was a copycat murders. That's why it's never been found, because there isn't one.
Quite well said. Then we've got a cameo appearance by Tony Shalhoub as kind of the Louche. I think he's supposed to be kind of Italian sailor guy who's flirting with Debbie in the bar. Where she's singing Macho Man.
Yes. Macho Man.
It's always nice to see Shalhoub, and of course he turns up again in Sonnenfeld's Men in Black as the the alien character whose head gets exploded by Will Smith at point blank range, and then the head grows back.
Just grows back.
Shalhoub goes, "Have you any idea how much that stings?"
See, the first Men in Black movie and the second one as well, also very good films. They're also highly watchable.
Yes, yeah, they are. I think the third one's quite fun as well. Actually, I've not seen the fourth one, but
no, I've not seen the fourth one. I think I've seen the third one, but I can't be sure. But I've definitely seen the first and second one many times.
The third one is the one with Jermaine Clement in. So, as what we do in the Shadows fans, we need to respect that one a bit. It's quite a good plot.
I don't think I've seen it then.
And it is still Sonnenfeld as well. So it's
right. All right.
Plus Emma Thompson. That's the first one where they have Emma Thompson in. So I think all those are good. Then we've got a cameo appearance by Tony Shalhoub as kind of the Louche. I think he's supposed to be kind of Italian sailor guy who's flirting with Debbie in the bar. Before she blows up the house.
Yeah.
And then I thought Stella would be correcting them and saying killers. So this is my final note, and it's appropriate to kind of end the discussion on the very end of the movie, which I thought Stella loved this as well. The end of the movie is the end of Carrie.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think viewers with our tastes kind of knew what was coming as soon as he leans over to put flowers on the grave.
You can see it coming from minutes away, can't you? It's like, yep. Because what they're talking about is that how would you kill your husband? And Wednesday said, I'd scare him to death. And then he leans over to put flowers on the grave, and out comes the hand, and it's like...
It did leave me thinking about, what does that really mean? Is that Wednesday saying that she really loves him because that's the way she would show her love, by scaring him to death? Or possibly. Is Debbie somehow alive? Or is that Thing's hand? Maybe it's just Thing.
Maybe it's just Thing and it's a prank. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. Write yourself a fan fiction and have it that way.
I think I will imagine that it is Thing.
Yeah.
Because that would be a great gag. I mean, if you've got a family member who is a crawling hand, you do stuff like that all the time.
Then use him, use him. Use him or lose him.
I mean, I think there is a great gag in Addams Family 1 where they're doing the seance. And I think it's Grandmama who's saying, hold my hand to the visiting lady. And then the hand comes off. She's like...
It's just handsome Thing, yeah.
Yes!
Oh, God. It's so funny.
Yeah,
well, tomorrow I've got to do packing because we're going to Boomtown on Thursday. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the films on in the background while I'm mooching about and cleaning the camping gear and stuff. That's what I'm going to do.
They're ideal, cheery background films for when you've got to do those kind of chores, aren't they? So that'll work out. That'll be wonderful. Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of our discussion. I'm just going to say one more thing, not about the film, before we go, because I think this episode is going to come out soon, so I'm going to slip in a recommendation, because it will still be on Netflix when this episode drops, I think, which is the series Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Kirsty recommended it quite a while ago, and I ended up watching a lot of it. I really like it, but I'm only kind of halfway through the series, and I've had to stop my Netflix because I can't afford it at the minute. But my friend who I've been watching it with has carried on watching it, and last night he was texting me saying, "You're gonna love episode 7. Christ on toast, it's crazy." So,
Christ on toast.
So God knows.
I don't think I got as far as 7, so I couldn't either confirm nor deny if it's worth a Christ on toast. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think I got to 4. Yeah, around 4. But I
think it is a bit of a variable series. Some of the episodes are better than others, but they're all by different directors, aren't they? And and you get there's a nice variance of styles and things and the kind of stories. Some of them are H.P. Lovecraft, some of them are other authors. I think some of them are original screen stories. So I've enjoyed that. But yeah, basically, listeners, I don't know what it is, but you've got a very strong recommendation for episode 7 of Cabinet of Curiosities there. So I might go and just look that up. I can't watch it because I don't have Netflix, but I can find out what the episode is. And on that note, Stella, I think we've come to the end of our time. Thank you for this wonderful chat about Addams Family Values, and thank you for recommending this great movie to me, which has just massively cheered me up.
It's much fun.
It really is, and I wish there were more Addams Family movies in that style, but maybe I'll go and watch Wednesday instead.
Watch Wednesday
when I can
when you
get
your Netflix back.
Yeah, so that's a good recommendation as well. Well, Stella, thank you very much. We'll be back soon talking about I know not what, but I think we're due some more Omen pretty soon. So we'll see what happens there.
God.
So,
all right then.
In the meantime, have a wonderful time at Boomtown. And,
I will.
And listener, you'll hear from us in the future. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye!
You have been listening to And Now the Podcast Starts. Produced and released by Ambidextrous Solutions Limited. Presented by Stella Gaynor and T.D. Velasquez. Special thanks to Greg Hume for our original theme music and to Brian Gorman for our original artwork. All dialogue and music clips from films, TV shows, and trailers are used for the purposes of criticism in the spirit of fair dealing as defined in UK law and fair use as defined in US law. No copyright infringement is intended. Please visit our home on the web, www.andnowpodcast.com, for more content and contact details. Or visit our Facebook pages at AndNowPod or at Lee Cushing Pod. Follow us on Twitter at AndNowPodcast or at Lee Cushing Podcast. If you'd like to donate to us, please visit patreon.com/AndNowPodcast. And now the podcast stops.